Do a sound check too, ladies. Thanks for tuning in for Investment Insight. Appreciate your time. And on this pretty sunny day, summer wasn't here, but it's here now. I ran this morning and it was very, very hot. Obviously, Investment Insight's an educational space. We do our best to provide accurate information. Please seek out competent legal, professional, and accounting advice for your unique situation before you make a decision. A couple fun facts. I thought this was kind of neat. These are kind of quotes. Summer means happy times and good sunshine. It means going to the beach, going to Disneyland, having fun. Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. Thought that was pretty cool. I don't think I've quoted the Beach Boys much. A lot of people with high IQ are terrible investors because they've got terrible temperaments. You need to keep raw, irrational emotion under control. Charlie Munger, the guy that Warren Buffett's partner in investing, was very accurate. Really, some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life professionally are some of the worst investors. Like, I've met people that can literally take a rocket ship and get it to the moon, but panic every time the stock market goes down. It's very, very interesting how that works out. Compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. Albert Einstein. Again, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. Albert Einstein. It's very, very good thing. When you invest, you are buying a day that you don't have to work. And that's very true. When you invest, you're buying a day you don't have to work. A lot of people ask me, what is an investment? And really what an investment is when you own these companies that people work for. I mean, why do most people work? Why do you guys think, why do most people work in our country? You can eat, you can survive, right? I mean, if you don't have any money, what are your choices? Right? What do you got to do? I mean, it's like this, say, if all the girls working here won the lottery tomorrow, how many would show up? Right? Harley says yes. Kimberly didn't respond. Kimberly, she fell this a couple days ago, so she's with the doctor all day. I can't believe she can even sit down. And so that's the thing is, people work because they got to work. And so when you invest in companies, you're basically saying for yourself, at some point, I'm not going to have to come to work anymore. I'm going to be able to work for myself. And then I'll still be working, just not the same level. And so that's pretty. This is a cool little video I saw on Bloomberg. Don't move the camera. I thought you guys would like this. You guys might not be ready for it, though.
3D printed steaks. They can eat from mushroom and fermented plant-based beef. Is the taste of the future.
"3D printed steaks." You guys hear that? $450 billion alternative meats. Cold cut meat mushrooms. I'm a little scared of this guy, just saying. See, everything would look perfect.
Fermentation is yet another technology being used to create wool couples.
I think it's interesting. Did anybody here have a sausage ball today? Did you guys know those are made out of mushrooms? No, I made that up. I'm just kidding. But anyway, I thought that was a funny thing. But no, it's very interesting when you look at what's going on with farming right now. It's kind of like you think about it 100 years ago. Did you guys know chicken costs more than beef? And now, because they've found more efficient ways to grow chickens, even though it's kind of scary when you see them on those trucks going from Beech Grove, just saying, you're like seeing all these chickens going to slaughter. Like you see that they've brought the price of chicken down. Well, you can imagine in a world, it's much, much easier. Like my farm, when my grandfather was farming, he had 6 full-time employees, including the family, working on my farm with mules every day. Now, 2 guys plant the farm in 3 weeks or less, harvest in 3 weeks or less, and they're done. So it's much more efficient to grow soybeans and corn now than it is to do traditional old farming. And so you can see at some point, it's very, very likely that the price of these mushrooms and these soybeans will get cheaper than beef. And at that point, what are people going to start doing? They'll start eating it. And as fast as I eat, I probably couldn't even tell the difference for most of the time, just telling you the truth. So I thought it was kind of an interesting article. I don't eat a lot of these other meats, but if you go to any fast food restaurant in town, they're going to have what? They're going to have an alternative besides regular meat, which means people are what? Yeah, where's the beef? The beef is gone. Interesting article I was reading this morning, or yesterday, sorry. Actually, it was Friday. China's ban on Taiwan pineapples backfires. I don't know if you guys knew this, but earlier this year, China banned all the pineapples from Taiwan. If you guys have been paying attention to the news, Taiwan and China are getting much more ready for a conflict. And so for years, if you guys remember the history of China had a civil war after World War II, and the people that were communist, they took over the mainland China, and the people that weren't communists fled to a little country called Taiwan. And Mao Zedong, I was listening last night, his plan was he was just going to send a huge army of boats and just take the place over no matter what. And guess who stopped him? U.S. Navy. U.S. Navy said, we got an aircraft carrier here. We got the 6th Fleet, or the 5th Fleet, I can't remember which one it is. You come through that strait, you're all dying. You're all going to the bottom of the ocean. And so up to that point, they've never really been really bad tensions. Well, recently, the current president of China is saying he wants to take Taiwan back even if it's by force. And so they've been building military bases on these islands in the ocean, with the idea being that they'll sink U.S. Navy ships guarding that strait, and that they won't let the U.S. Navy even come into that strait because they'll stop it from happening, and then they'll invade Taiwan. And so part of this process has also been a ban on pineapples, which I know sounds kind of crazy. So 5 months ago, China banned all pineapples from Taiwan, and it was viewed as an attempt to undermine the current president, who's anti-communism. But what's crazy is they said they were going to buy the pineapples, and then the Japanese people heard about it, and so guess what they started doing? Started buying pineapples like crazy. And they made it a thing. If you want to talk about racism in our country, there's more racism in China and Japan and South Korea than anywhere in the world. So if you want to get people motivated, that's a very powerful motivator. And so the Japanese searched 8-fold. They're buying 8 times as many pineapples as they were a year ago. 16,556 tons of pineapples were bought by Japan through June from a year ago. Isn't that crazy? And then also in Taiwan, they started a domestic campaign on eating pineapples. Well, if the Chinese are going to ban our pineapples, what are we going to do? We're going to start putting it in everything. So, for instance, some things you guys may or may not want to eat. They have a beef noodle soup in pineapple, shrimp balls in pineapple, fried rice in pineapple, and all kinds of dishes around. And so they're even doing drinks and everything else. But what's interesting is, since China banned pineapples, which, by the way, last year, China bought every pineapple almost Taiwan sold. They're buying none now. They're selling 28% more pineapples today than they were a year ago. I think it's interesting. You guys remember when President Trump did the China trade war, one of the things he did was he banned certain goods from China. And then the Chinese said, well, they're not going to buy any of our soybeans and our stuff. So what happened? Who started buying that stuff? Well, if China, China eats a lot of pork, right? And what's pork made out of? Where's pork come from? Pigs. What do the pigs eat? Soybeans and corn, right? So if you don't eat soybeans and corn, and you eat a lot of pigs, you're kind of in trouble, right? Because you don't have any what? And then to feed them. And so China started buying all their soybeans from Argentina. And you know what's weird? Guess who started buying our soybeans? Argentina. See, this whole thing, when you try to do these trade war things, they don't exactly work out the way you intend, because here are the Chinese, a year ago were laughing at Trump for his trade war stuff. And now they try to do the same thing on who? Taiwan. And now what's happening to them? They're losing business. I mean, you talk about, one of the main reasons why, in my opinion, lumber prices went up so much is we banned lumber from Canada. Well, guess who has a lot of trees? Canada. So you want to know why houses cost more to build? Well, if you ban all the trees from Canada, what does Canada not have a lot of? People. But they got a lot of what? Trees. What do we have? A lot of people, not a lot of trees. So if we ban stuff from Canada, what happens to the price? It starts going up. And so this just shows you how this makes a big difference. And just, this is another article about this I was reading. And this is on Argentina. The Argentina River that carries soybeans is drying up. If you guys weren't aware of this. Shaking its way through South America rainforest, the Paraná River carries 80% of Argentinian soybeans. And here's a picture of it today. You guys see that? Dried up. Now, here in Tennessee, we've not been having a drought. But if you go to California, if you go to the western part of the United States, if you go to South America, what are they experiencing right now? Major, major droughts. And this is a huge deal for us. It affects us. So the rivers are the lowest they've been in the last 80 years because of the drought that's been coming through. To tell you how much this matters is, now, because the river is so low, they can't fill up the ships with soybeans because they'll sink at the bottom. Okay? And then Argentina gets a lot of their electricity from hydropower. If you guys are aware of this, but Hoover Dam next year will probably be reduced capacity because there's not enough water in the Colorado River. You guys hear what I said? Hoover Dam is running out of water. And you can see the pictures of it. Just Google them anytime. So what's happened in Argentina is because their rivers are low and their power plants are going low, they're having to get more diesel fuel, which is another reason why gas prices are what? Going up. If you get drought, how long does it take to build a nuclear power plant? A long time. So if these power plants stop working, there's only one thing you can do pretty quick. That's a diesel generator, which I know it sounds crazy, right? But actually in McMinnville, if you go to McMinnville, the electric company there has tons of diesel generators they run when it's really cold. They literally run diesel generators. And did you know those diesel generators generate more power than the dam in Rock Island? Which is crazy, but it's true. And so Right now, Argentina dams are operating at a third of capacity. Now, what this is causing, so here's what happens if you're a country and this happens. So if you're Argentina and you can't load your ships, what does this mean? What do you guys think would be some economic consequences? Yeah, so the price is going to do what for soybeans? It's going to go up, right? Because if it costs more to ship it, are you going to have to pay more for it? Twice as many ships, right? So the price goes up. Well, when your price goes up, does that make American soybeans more valuable? Yeah, because guess what? It's a global economy. Do the pigs in China care if the soybeans are from Argentina or America? You ever met a pig that cared about what they ate? There's a term called pig, right? It's a reference in popular history, so no one cares. So when you're selling a commodity, there's no markup typically. Everyone gets what it is. Now, Argentina has had 50% inflation for years now. You guys hear what I said? How about, who wants to go to the store and every month things cost 4% more? Imagine if you're going to buy a car, right? And you're like, okay, so I priced out a Ford van to do what I wanted to do. It was 30 grand, right? But then if it went up 4% next month, they'd want how much more? What, $1,200 more? And then the next month they'd want what? $1,200 more. By the end of the year, they would want $45,000 for that same van. And so that's what Argentina goes through every day. Well, Argentina pretty much only sells one thing in the global market. You know what that is? Soybeans. Now, let me tell you this. If you're an investor in Argentina, do you want to own pesos or dollars? Why? Because your money's not moving. Your money's holding its value. I don't know if you guys knew this, but there's twice as much money in circulation outside the United States as inside the United States. Twice as much money. Did you guys know that? And that's because people are holding on their dollars because they don't what? They don't trust their own government. Right? And so why this matters so much, and this has a global implication, is the Argentina Central Bank has had to raise interest rates to try to keep inflation down. And on top of that, the one thing they export that would bring dollars in the country, they're getting less dollars for. So now they're out of money. They're out of dollars. And so this river drying up is having a huge implication on the Argentinian economy. Now, what does that mean for our country? How does that affect us? How does that affect your investments? Yeah. I mean, America looks more attractive, right? You know, here where they grow our soybeans in Tennessee, do we have a water shortage here? No. Not yet. Tennessee, not California. So that encourages more people to move where? Here. If you're an Argentinian person and you live in Argentina and you're working really hard, but every day things are going up that much in value and you're losing your money, does that encourage you to leave Argentina? Where would you want to go? There's 10 million job openings in the United States. So what does that say? It doesn't matter who the president is, it's economics, right? People follow the what? The money. The money is what people follow. And so this thing in Argentina makes our soybeans more expensive, makes them more valuable. It also makes our country, because in Argentina, apparently they only have this river to transport their soybeans. They don't have a railroad. Well, in our country, if you can't get the soybeans they keep that Mississippi River going pretty good because it's a big transportation hub of food. And they have those locks, and they spend a lot of money to keep that Mississippi River what? Flowing. You know? And so the fact that their country didn't spend money on infrastructure means what? They're losing the value of their country. And so I thought that was an interesting article. But what's interesting about all this is, think about how interesting this is in the last 2 years. 2 years ago, Argentina is selling all the soybeans America's not selling to China. Now they can't get them to market, and China is banning pineapple. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. It's like a soap opera. And it's very interesting because all of it is bad economic policy, and it doesn't work. Because the Chinese try to ban pineapples, and what do people start doing? They start buying more, which means the price went up. Okay. Now, let's talk about this infrastructure plan. I need an eraser. Kimberly, can you get me an eraser? I think it's in there. Okay. Hey, Bill. So what is in the infrastructure plan? If you guys are aware, now let me give you a little tidbit. Right before you guys came in here, they put a little thing hidden in that big old bill that just came out this morning. A national mile tax pilot program was tucked into the infrastructure bill. So now the Department of Transportation is going to start a program where they start taxing people by miles driven to figure out a way. Because here's the thing, if we go to electric cars, how are we going to pay for the interstate system? They're going to have to tax you in the miles you've driven or the car. They're going to have to find some way to tax you because right now we pay for the roads through the 18-cent, I think it's 18-cent, federal gas tax. If there's no gasoline being bought, what happens to that gas tax? It's interesting because one of the things that they promised they weren't going to do is tax you on miles driven. But what do they hit in the bill? Which I think they should do it personally, but that's in the bill now. It's interesting because it's a political situation. Because personally, I think I drive more. I should pay more for the roads because I use them more. I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, that's just my personal viewpoint. But, you wouldn't say much about raising taxes on me, but I would say that's a good idea. Okay, so here's what's in the bill. Originally, they proposed a $2.6 trillion infrastructure bill. To give you an example, this is the original chart that they had on there. You see all these little pies? That's what they actually did. This is what they proposed. So one of the best things about the new infrastructure bill, what I like about it, is it's the first bipartisan bill passed that didn't involve a COVID emergency in probably the last 15 years. Did you guys hear what I said? The first bipartisan bill passed in the United States in 15 years that I can think of. The last one I can remember is they did some modifications in 2006 with some tax bills. And they had some bipartisan bills. But you think about it, when President Obama was president, his health care bill and his financial reform bill had no Republican votes. When President Trump was president, his tax bill had no Democratic votes. So this is the first bipartisan bill to be passed in probably 15 years that I can think of. Unless you can't think of anything else, Bill. You might have another one. But what's interesting is, so in the bill, there's $110 billion for roads and bridges, $66 billion for railways, $25 billion for airports, $39 billion for public transportation. But here's what's interesting. $65 billion for power infrastructure for electric cars. What are we really missing in our country for electric cars? Charging stations. So we need about $1 trillion. If you guys want to do the math, you guys know that we need $1 trillion for charging stations, and we need another $1 trillion for supply lines to make it happen. But what is this a start of? They're funding just as much money for charging stations as railroads. That's a big, big deal. $65 billion for broadband internet access, $55 billion for water infrastructure, and $8 billion just for water in the West Coast because of the water shortage. And then I don't know what resiliency is. You know what that term would be? But there's $47 billion for resiliency, which I don't know what that even means. To tell you the truth, I can't tell you what that means in the bill, but it's in there. And then $15 billion for electric vehicles, $11 billion for road safeties, and $21 billion to clean up old mines and wells. But what's interesting about the infrastructure bill is, like I said, it is a positive change, at least for the moment, because it's the first time there's been a bipartisan bill passed in a long, long time. Do you have any questions about the infrastructure bill? It will probably pass today or tomorrow, is probably the odds of that. Any questions there? Anything else? Okay. Okay. So, a couple little things to talk about today, except for the fun little facts. Do you have any questions about anything or anything in general? You guys are awfully quiet today. So, okay. So, one of the things I had to talk about today was there's an article about Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett cash trap. Can it snare big tech too? Is having too much cash a problem? Why? It doesn't hold its value, right? If you think about it, 100 grand today is worth, 100 grand a year ago, how much is it worth today? In terms of buying power. If you wanted to spend 100 grand on a house today, would it be worth a lot less money? Would you get a lot less house than you would have got a year ago? You could still buy a house a year and a half ago in Middle or Manchester for $130,000 to $140,000. Can you do that today? A decent house? No way. No way. And so, one of the things I want to show you guys is, if you guys, Kimberly and Harley, if you want to make sure everybody gets each one of each. Kimberly, if you want to put someone out. Well, Harley, if you want to pass this out. Sorry, I'll give you the one for Bill. I need the other one too, Kimberly, so I can tab off on it. I don't. The question is, how much money they spend on that?
I guess that's what they're preparing for.
Could be it. Okay. This first chart you see right here. Do you guys see this chart right here? Everybody see this chart? This is total cash reserves in banks in the United States. Now, what's very interesting about this is, can you tell when COVID happened? It's always remarkable to me. One of the things government does is government gives people money with the intention of people to do what? Did that work? No, because they focus on what people should do versus focusing on what people will do. They need to focus more on psychology and less on what they want them to do. You want to get people off smoking? You make cigarettes more expensive. It works. You know, go to Europe, everybody smokes. Come to America, smoking is way down for worse than it used to be. But you got to make it more expensive. You want to make people skinnier? You make foods that are unhealthy more expensive. Not popular, but it'll work. Okay? But what's interesting about cash reserves is U.S. bank deposits last year were $13 trillion. And now they're over $17 trillion. There's 30% more money in the bank than there was what? A year ago. Is it a big surprise to you that interest rates are lower? Hey, look at this next chart. This shows you the 10-year Treasury. Why do you guys think interest rates are so low? What are some reasons? Well, the first one I already gave you, right? What's that? There's more money. You put all this money in the system, you've created what? More supply. Well, if you don't create more demand, what's the problem there? Yeah. So the thing about it is, unless people borrow more money, if you print more money, what happens to the interest rates? They got to go down. You need people like Kimberly and Harley, who don't own a house right now, to buy a house. If you guys want your interest rates to go up, after the meeting, you need to have a conversation with them about the urgency for them to buy a house right now so your CDs can pay more, right? Because what was happening right here in the 80s? You guys remember? What year do you guys think I was born? No, you can pick on me, it's fine. What year do you think it was? Want to guess? I just had a birthday, so you guys should know. Just kidding. 1983. I'm one of the first kids of a what? Baby boomer. Or the first millennials, not baby boomers, but first millennial kids. There were tons of millennial kids born. Well, when all these kids were born in the 80s, what did all these parents want to have now all of a sudden? A house. Because they want what? Place for their kids to grow up that's safe. And so right now, the U.S. birth rate is the lowest it's ever been. You think that doesn't affect interest rates? Think about this. If Harley and Kimberly had kids tomorrow, would they want to live with their parents, or would they want to own a house? What do you say? What do you say, Harley? So, I'm getting personal, which is probably not a good idea, Investment Insight. Especially with 10 million job openings, they're probably like, I'm done with this. We're just gone. But the thing is, when you look at it, this matters, right? Because if people have more kids, I was looking at a passenger van, right, for me. Why do I need a passenger van? I got a lot of kids. So would I ever be buying a passenger van in my life if I didn't have what? More kids. No way. I don't want to drive those things. They're ugly. Everyone looks like a school bus. Who wants to drive a school bus? You see that commercial when I'm 16. Got my convertible. Now I'm driving a passenger van. Right? Nobody buys a passenger van for fun unless we have more kids. And that affects interest rates. That affects your investments. Because as long as there's less kids, there's less demand for people to what? Buy a house. And then you look at this other chart. The government is printing more money than they ever have before. And people, instead of spending it, are what? Saving it. The federal government's borrowed more money in the last 2 years than they had in the previous 200. So that people could spend money. And what did people do with it? They saved it. Not all people, but primarily, your wealthy people have taken that money and they've invested it or they've saved it. And your poor people have what? They spent theirs. Because a lot of poor people don't even have a checking account. Right? They don't even have a bank account. You ever go to Walmart, you see that little place in there where people are cashing checks? Why do they do that? Because they don't have a bank account. So when we talk about people with bank accounts, that is going to include more wealthy people, right? Because they actually have a banking account. So what's interesting about this is all these economic policies geared towards helping out poor people seem to be doing what? Helping rich people or wealthier people. Not necessarily rich, people with more money. Okay. But what's interesting about this is this curve, what would it take? What are some ways we could get interest rates higher? You put your thinking cap on. You're on the Federal Reserve right now. How do you raise interest rates? What's that? Well, Phil, I didn't know Phil was a warmonger, but that's good. Probably going to war would help, right? Because if more people went to war, but it may not actually. There'd be more demand for war bonds. So that's a possibility. Never thought about that, but that is true. It's what happened in World War II. Have more kids would help, right? Because if there's more kids, more people are going to buy a house, and eventually those kids are going to start borrowing money when they want a house. More immigration, right? We just talked about earlier about how Argentina is struggling so much. Argentina has a lot of super smart, super hardworking people. We have 10 million job openings. What would be a smart idea for our country? Get a recruiting office in Argentina. Bring the people here. Let them work here. And then when they come here, they're going to want what eventually? A house, a car. And then they're going to end up borrowing money, which means that's going to cause your rates to what? Go up. The other thing is reduce the money supply. Instead of printing all this money, you could start what? Well, getting it out of the system, which is when you raise interest rates, you pull money out of the system. So the Federal Reserve could start removing money from the system. That'd be a way to do it. Because you think about it, we talked about Argentina having 50% inflation. And Argentina is raising interest rates to control inflation. We've had really high inflation over the last year. I don't care what the government says. If it says it's 5 or 6%, they're lying. Because if I go to buy a used car, it costs 10% more than last year. When I'm looking at them, not the 1 or 2% they're saying. When I go to buy a house, I mean, isn't it odd that you could find so many houses in Manchester for $450,000? When I moved here, a $450,000 house in Manchester was what? Unheard of. I mean, they just didn't exist. If you found one, I mean, I remember there's a house over the way that was like 8,000 square feet, 8,600, sat on the market for years, and it was like $600,000 or $700,000. It's in the market for years, right? And had 30 acres with it. It was a palace, right? And so now that's above average home, but it's not a mansion. And so when people say there's not inflation, inflation is everywhere. And so one of the ways you do that is you take money out of supply. Think of this, right? If we're sitting here in this room and we put $1 million down here, what is the best way for you to keep your money? Phil, you got to leave. Keep the money here. Brent, you're out. Money stays. Right? More money comes for you, right? Because the whole idea is, but if you keep bringing money in, let's do the example differently. Let's say we own everything in Manchester. We have $100 million, everything's for sale in Manchester, and we've got $100 million to buy it. Then all of us are going to what? Set the what? The price for everything. If you throw another $10 million in here and you divide it amongst us all, what's the price going to do? It's going to go up because you keep putting more money in, and there's only so much land in Manchester. The same thing is true with U.S. companies. U.S. companies, there's only so many of them. If you're going to buy a phone right now, who are you going to buy it from? Like what vendor? Who's going to make it? Apple. Samsung, Google. There's only so many companies that what? So if you give everybody in America an extra $1,000, you think they sold more phones last year? Because what do phones cost now? About $1,200. So what do people start doing? They start buying more phones. And so it's not rocket scientists to figure out this. Now, this goes into a problem that U.S. companies are having now. They've got too much cash. To give you an example here, Warren Buffett, through Berkshire Hathaway, is sitting on $150 billion. Okay? Apple Computer Company. Apple has bought back more shares and they have paid more dividends than any company I can remember. But you know how much cash they have today? $200 billion. I don't know the current market cap. I think the market cap of Dollar General is $50 billion. Do you guys realize with the extra cash Apple is sitting around, they could buy 4 Dollar General sized companies? And they still would have more money what? Next week. They wouldn't even miss it. Okay, Google has $140 billion. Amazon, $100 billion. Facebook, $65 billion. Wait, I thought Facebook was free. Hold on, never mind. So anyway, bad joke. So the thing is, nothing's free. And so when you look at all these companies, they have a huge problem because, like American people, they're sitting on what? A ton of cash. So when we're focused on an infrastructure bill, why aren't we focused on getting these companies and these people to invest that money to create jobs? Somebody asked me, I think it might have been Brent, about microchips. Like, are they ever going to make microchips in the United States? What do these companies use except for Warren Buffett? Tons of microchips. I don't know if you know this. You know why there's a shortage of microchips in the automotive industry? I want to know. Let me give you an idea here. If you had a choice right now, would you rather walk into a car dealership or the Verizon store? Verizon store. Every time I go into a car dealership, my blood pressure, what? You can watch my watch. It goes up. Because you don't know if you're going to have high pressure. You don't know what it's going to be like. You know, like you go to the Verizon store, it's like, this phone costs $1,200 at the Verizon store here, and the Verizon store next door, and the Verizon store next door. When you go in to buy a car, you're like, what does everybody ask you? If you buy a car, what does everybody ask you? What's the first question you want to ask? What'd you pay for it? What it cost? Because what are they going to do? Brent got a good deal. No, Brent got screwed over. You know, I mean, that's what people are going to start saying, right? That's what they want to hear. And so the thing about it is, and that's the same reason why there's a chip shortage for automotive industry. I don't know if you guys knew this or not, but the technology companies pay more for their chips. Automotive industry wants to what? Pay less. And since they paid less, what are they not getting? They're not getting the chips. Because guess what the Taiwanese said? I'd rather walk in the Verizon store than walk in the car dealership. So they sold all their chips to who? Apple and the rest of them. Because they gave them more money. And the thing about it is, what's interesting is, all of these companies have enough money to make those chips anywhere they want to make them. But what are they doing instead? They're sitting on cash and they're complaining about what? There's not enough chips. Because they want someone else to make them for them, right? Because guess what the chip guys don't do? They don't what? They don't really make money. The industries don't make money. That's why Apple doesn't want to be involved in it. So, but what do you do with all this money? So let's talk about if you had this kind of money to invest, what would you invest in? Because a lot of people, I think this is very important, a lot of people look at the stock market and say, oh man, Dow Jones just hit 30,000. When's it going to crash? You know, but it's not that, right? Everything in investing, it's a chessboard, it's a chess game. If you were to say, Brent, sell all my stocks today, what would you buy? Right? That's the big question. Because when you compare, is the stock market expensive or is it cheap? It's not a matter of the Dow at 30,000. It's a matter of what? What else can you invest in? We already know that the federal government and people have tons of money in cash. All these companies have tons of money in cash. So what are they waiting for? I mean, if you think about it, our government is so focused on an infrastructure bill for $500 billion or $600 billion. How much cash is sitting there in these American companies? And do you think that these companies could spend it wiser than the government? If the government would encourage them to do better things with the money, what could they do? I'm going to tell you that they could do better things with the money, in my opinion. But that's what it is. So what would you invest in? So let's give you guys some options. So on Friday, Ascend Federal Credit Union on a 1-year CD, you know what the published rate was? 0.5. Not too far off, but 0.5%. They're interesting because they actually publish their rates. You can't get that from a lot of banks. A 10-year treasury was 1.3%. A 30-year treasury, 1.9. Did you guys realize that 15-year mortgage rates on conventional loans dropped to 1.75% last week? What does that tell you about interest rates? I'm telling you, if you're a saver and you want to have some money, you need to start getting some people pregnant. It's a bad joke. But these women need to start having more kids, because if you want to get your rates up, that's the big problem. It tells you the birth rate is connected to that situation. Number 4, 30-year corporate bonds, 3.29%. Now, like I said, these are some options here. Now, here's a couple other options. The S&P 500 SDV dividend fund is paying 2.48% and trades at 17 times earnings. The European IDV ETF is 4.43% and trades at 11 times earnings. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but stocks in Europe right now trade 40% lower than U.S. stocks. Why do you think that would be? Why are European stocks so much cheaper than the United States? You want to guess? Well, first thing is, where's Apple based at? Where's Apple Computer? What state is their headquarters? California. Yeah, Cupertino, California. Where's Google based at? San Francisco, right? California. Where's Amazon based at? Seattle. Where's Facebook based at? California. Are any of these companies European? No. If COVID, the variant, which Delta is seems to be more of a terrible disease, virus than the other one, if it continues to run rampant, is that good for Facebook's business? Yeah. Is it good for Apple's business? Is it good for Google's business? Is it good for Amazon's business? Right? Because what's unique, American companies, and I'm going to show you in a little bit, can actually make more money with COVID going on than without it. Can European companies do that? No, because they're what? Traditional companies. Your traditional businesses. It could be a big reason why more people are getting vaccinated in Europe than the United States. Right? Could be a big part of it. So IDV, which is all the high dividend paying funds, stocks in Europe, their dividend yield is 4.43%. Now you're telling me if I could buy the best companies in Europe with the highest dividends, I can get 4.5%? Is that better than 0.5% CD? I'd say so. I'd say it's a better investment. If my options are 0.5% or 4.5% plus the growth on the stock, what am I going to buy? I'd buy this all day long. I'm not saying recommend that for your portfolio, but that's an option. Number 7 is the S&P 500. Just buy every company in the United States. Number 8, buy some real estate. The biggest thing to factor in here is when you look at investments is whether or not you win or lose a month or a game. It's a big game of chess. And so when you're valuing your investments, at least when we do a portfolio here, we're not valuing, we're valuing it versus the options. If my options are this or this, guess what I'm going to buy? I'm probably going to buy a lot of this, right? Because it's not a very good deal, you know? And that's really what, when you look at U.S. companies, they're sitting all this cash, mainly because they don't know what to do with it. They're so big. And the American people are too. So how would all that cash help the stock market from going down very much? If the stock market dropped 10% tomorrow, what do you think people would start doing that had money? They start buying. So one of the things is, every time for the last year or so, when the stock market's dropped a little bit, what have people been doing? Buying like crazy because they got all this cash. And so until the cash washes out, it's very hard for the stock market to stay down for a long period of time. Right? Because people will start what? Using it. And that's really what makes this time unique. So let's go over it real quick. Do you have any questions about this or these things? I'm not trying to get overly political, but it's just interesting that we don't focus on psychology. We focus on what we want people to do. Like everybody wants everybody to eat a balanced diet. Who does that every day? Right? Everybody wants people to work out 30 minutes every day. Who works out 30 minutes every day? I'm close too, Harley, but every day? No. There's one day you sleep in. So. Anyway, but the thing is, and that's the whole thing is, what I wish when people would do a political debate, they would talk about what people will do versus what people should do. Okay. So let's get the scorecard right now. 87% of S&P 500 companies have reported as of Friday. Here's the crazy numbers. And you guys won't even believe this. These are crazy numbers. 87% of companies have higher revenue than expected. But here's the real crazy number. You know, last month we talked about the profit growth rate being 63%. The companies would make 63% more money than a year ago. Anybody want to guess what the real number's been so far? 88.8%. Did you guys hear what I said? Companies are making 88.8% more money than they were a year ago. That's insane. Since we've been doing Investment Insight, U.S. companies tend to make 10 to 12% more over the previous quarter is a good number. And they're making how much right now? 88.8% more money than a year ago. It was supposed to be 63%, and it's 88.8% with 87% of companies reporting. What's crazy about this is the forward profit expectation of the market is 21 times profit, which means the market right now, compared to interest rates, is 30 to 40% undervalued at the current rates. If the rates stay low this long for another year, the market is 20 to 30% undervalued, at least. Now, what's crazy is before COVID, S&P 500 companies made about $180 a share. Now they make $210 a share. Not only is our companies back where they were to COVID, but now they're what? Way, way ahead. And remember, this has become, Amazon says they don't make any money because they don't want to pay what? Taxes. They're sitting on $100 billion in what? Cash. Which means what? They're making money. I don't care. Look at, you follow the money, right? Revenue growth is expected to be 24.7% for the quarter. The net profit margin. I remember when I was doing my business policy class, so when I was in college, my final senior year, I had to take everything I'd done in college and do one big presentation to bring everything in. And if you didn't do well in that presentation, you failed college. So it's a very stressful class because it was 4,000 pages of research I had to do. And so I took one class, nutrition, in that class that semester, and all I did was what? Worked on that final paper and that final presentation. And I had a professor yell at me and say that companies can't make more than 7 or 8% profit. And companies right now are making 13%. The average company, we're not even talking about that's the average. Some are making even more. So that is an incredible number. They're expecting growth rate to be 28% next quarter and 14.4% of revenue growth. But ultimately, the market is now trading on 2022. So the big question now is what's going to happen next year? We obviously know next year you got an election going on, right? We also know that lots of the promises that Joe Biden made about spending more money so far have gotten what? Cut down. I mean, think about this. When he first proposed his infrastructure bill, he wanted to spend almost $3 trillion. And they're spending about $500 or $600 billion above what they were going to spend anyway. So hopefully that'll keep inflation in check, right? Because if they keep spending and printing more money, what's inflation going to do? It's going to go up. I mean, this is not an accident. When you look at these bank accounts having so much more money, it's some big surprise that housing is more expensive? It's some big, is this, I mean, really, should anybody really be surprised? If they spend another $3 trillion, how much harder is it going to be for Harley and Kimberly to buy a house? It's going to be that much harder, right? So, I mean, think about this. If I could give you $4,000 cash, but if you want to buy a house, it costs $40,000 more, is that a good trade? Who wants to do that deal? That's what happened, right? That's what happened. Now, as we're showing you here, U.S. companies are benefiting crazy. If you're an investor in the stock market, what's happened for you the last year and a half? You've made a ton of money. So you've what? You've benefited. But is that what the government intended to happen? Maybe that is what they intended, but I don't think that's what they wanted to happen, right? They wanted everyone to have opportunity, and we're seeing more and more less of it. But as investors, we know that if they spend more money, what's that going to do for the stock market? These companies are going to catch it. They're going to get the money. Like we talked about earlier, all that money was given out to people, and where did it go? Into people that have savings accounts. Now, we don't know who these people are, right? We know all of us in this room probably are one of them. But all those people that don't have checking accounts and savings accounts, what do they probably not have more of? They probably don't have much more money than they had a year ago. So if they print more money, do you think this is going to go up? I'd say so. I'd say it'd be even higher. I'd say it'd be more like here. But what's interesting about this curve is this also shows you what they're really doing on interest rates, right? Because this one right here shows you what? This shows you interest rates on your CDs. So if you bought a CD from a Ascend Federal Credit Union for 0.5%, did you lose money over the last year? Yes. Because of what? Inflation. Your money doesn't buy as much. So what they're doing is they're stealing money from people in CDs and they're putting it to people that own stocks and real estate. They're encouraging those people to go out and get even more money, and the people that own CDs and cash are what? They're paying the price. So as investors, if we're playing this big game of chess, are the people, who are the people protesting right now in America? Black Lives Matter, right? Black Lives Matter are protesting. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be protesting. But the CD people aren't what? Are the people that own CDs at banks, are they protesting? Should they be protesting too? Yeah, they should be. Because they're what? They're paying for all this. They're losing money. And that's the game. In the game of chess, Black Lives Matters, I'm not saying African Americans should be protesting. They should probably be protesting too. But also, guess who should join the protest? Anybody that has a CD. Because their money's going down in value. Right? I mean, it's common sense. So, but as investors, instead of protesting, what do? We buy investments that protect yourself when this happens. I mean, I can vote for whoever I want to vote for. I'd vote for a balanced budget amendment if it was up to me. But there aren't enough people like me that are going to do that. So my only other option is to what? Buy investments that protect myself when this happens. That's all you can do. You can vote how you want, but really the money is what makes the most impact on your life. And that's what you do as an investor. And that's what we talked about today. Thanks for coming in today, guys. Appreciate you guys tuning in online. Thanks for watching us on Facebook Live.